Hi everybody. Um, Here's another video. This one is with a head movement. It's my first time trying this. Look at this. It actually works. Face recognition. It's following me. Um, so another video. Getting a lot of things out. Um, Not many people watch, like 80, 100. It's enough for me. Thank you to everybody that's watching. So the other question was right now. I have a couple of friends. What are the Europeans? And I get this a lot, Europeans. It's hard for me to answer for all of Europe. Europe, yes, it's an entity, but it's so many different countries. Um, but there is definitely an attitude right now. But basically, what are the Germans? I can answer better. In German media or international media, think about the whole, USA crisis right now with Trump. So this is a Trump issue right now. I haven't done one on Trump. It's himself. Um, and what the viewpoint is on what's going on in the United States. Obvious. It's, every day on the news. Uh, and by the way, I'd like to say this. I think you have better access to more international news here, especially if you want to. I don't know how many Americans would actually get on, Chinese TV or, Al Jazeera in English, the Arabian, largest Arabian network, or, anything that's from abroad, just to see their point of view, especially Hindustan Times from India. And if you look at their reporting on all different types of issues. So, like I said, I'm not that informed, but I think I'm pretty informed, at least to make some kind of a decision with all this confusion and how they view Donald Trump. Now, right now, Donald Trump's issues are different from what the Europeans and the Asians are looking at than what we look at in the US. I'll get to that later. From a European perspective, the Ukrainian war seems to be probably the most important issue to them. They're not pro-Trump. Let's be honest. The Europeans are kind of like, and this is maybe correct, but they feel like they've been left alone. That basically uh, Trump has been played by Putin. Especially now that it's like I think 2 weeks since their last meeting, where he had promised that if there's no solution when I go there, ceasefire, then I'm gonna, tariffs really be really hard on Russia. He didn't do that. 2 weeks have passed. And in fact, the Europeans are talking about how attacks have actually increased every single day since their meeting. So, they have like over 1 million refugees here in Germany alone. I can do another video on that, how they're being treated here. But, they're not really pro-Trump from that point of view. Very anti-Russian. And therefore, right now the stance where Trump is obviously a little bit pro-Russian. Now I'm going to get a lot of trouble for saying this. Because in Europe you have different attitudes. Like I said, some countries are a little bit pro-Russian, and I'm not pro-Russian from this point of view. Pro-Trump, I'm sorry. I'm not pro-Trump. Okay, and I'll show to this later. Maybe it's going to be a part two because I don't know how long this video is going to be. But we have right now. It seems to be this huge propaganda from the Europeans that the Russians are the big bad guys. They're going to come, going to destroy, and next is Poland and Ukraine, and after Ukraine, it's the Slovakia, and it's Hungary, and the whole European is going to fall, and we have to spend money on rearm Europe, and all of a sudden European governments are creating billions of dollars of defense spending, to fight the evil Russians and stuff. I want to call bullshit on that. I don't see this. I'm not saying that Putin is the nice guy. Okay, I love the Russian people. It doesn't mean I like Putin. I like the American people. It doesn't mean I like Trump. Now, Trump's attitude towards Russia, even the Europeans, or this whole thing, he can be right. Don't shoot me. Even a broken clock can be right twice a day. Um, even if he's doing it for all the wrong reasons, I look at it differently. Please look into this. You know, After the fall of the Soviet Union and the whole Crimean crisis, please look into it. The Crimeans are 90% Russian. It was given to Russia as a present when they were all one big unhappy family. Those people feel Russian. You can't change that. For those of you that have been to Europe, I think a lot of my Greek friends will understand that. Like the Greeks of Turkey or the Greeks of southern Albania. Um, they might be, Albanian citizens, but they're ethnically Greeks. They feel Greek. They speak Greek at home. That's how these Russians, thousands of years now, they've been living as Russians, this Donbass area. It seems that the Russians are taking over anything that's Russian. The guy's definitely a nationalist, and this is bad. I'm not for it. But to pretend that, France is going to fall and he's going to attack Russia, the guy's having a problem with Ukraine. This whole thing of, Russia being the superpower that's going to just come and attack is just complete bullshit. Call bullshit again on that one. Because they're just not that strong as we think. Look how much problems they're just having with the Ukraine, with minimal support from no armies on the ground, just the Ukrainian army with the West supporting them. So I'm not really scared of that. I'm actually for peace. I'm not against that. Like I said, and this has nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with how the Europeans view that issue. I'm against the Europeans on that, basically. I don't consider Russia a threat, as others do. I consider it, I guess, a threat to the Ukraine. I understand it's very bad, but those people living in the Donbass and the Crimea do not want to join Russia. I'm sorry, the Ukraine. It's just the way it is. The Europeans, the hypocrisy, they bombed the shit out of Serbia because the Kosovars didn't want to be part of Serbia, right? They wanted to be, independent. So we bombed the shit out of them because we wanted them to be independent. And yet here we are, when the Russians of the Ukraine do the same thing. We kind of don't even realize the hypocrisy of it. The Catalonians wanted independence in Spain. Remember that? They arrested everybody. They put them in jail. So basically means, who you are, who you're buying weapons from. So I'm not for that. Okay. Independent of Trump supports it or not. So that's the major view of Europe there. Also on the news a little bit about, Trump again with the Nobel Peace Prize. There's no fucking way that the Europeans or anybody around here, especially the Norwegian committee where he made a call, and again, the Europeans together with Trump, what the hypocrisy is just amazing, kind of, Here we are in Israel, Israel has had more children under 16 years old die civilian deaths than all the Ukrainians combined. Think about this, people. More children under 16 years old than all this, and we don't have a problem with that. Europeans don't have a problem with that. In fact, Israel is playing in the European Basketball EuroLeague for the European Championship, but we couldn't let the Russians in because they're really bad. I mean, the propaganda is just amazing. I'm sorry, people, it makes me sick, kind of, So, having said that, like I said, I'm not pro-Trump. Now we can go to Trump and talk about Trump and how, again, the Europeans are looking at him and this whole issue. Let me finish off with the Nobel Peace Prize. Or the Europeans, the last couple. Let's try to keep a current event for the last week. The guy that stopped 9/10 wars, they're just laughing. If you look at the Hindustan Times or newspapers from India, that's not what's going on. Donald Trump lives in his own little fantasy world. I think we can all agree, we did yesterday, which is kind of hard to have anybody agree on anything, is that Donald Trump lies. Simple as that. And we all agree that politicians lie. But never to the extent that we've seen this. This is beyond lying now. We've gone into the realm of science fiction. We've come to the realm of, what was the word? Alternative facts. We accept these now. This is the world of Donald Trump, according to most Europeans. And basically everything he says is just completely false, especially in India. Like I said, let's look at that from the Nobel Peace Prize, that he stopped the war there. Um, that's not the way they view it, put it that way. You know, the whole pack, you should read their newspapers, kind of, you know, look at the cryptocurrencies that Donald Trump has done. Some of them are based with Pakistan. What an amazing thing, huh? You know, in India and in a lot of the, you know, Taiwanese press, Indonesian press that I also read, Al Jazeera, especially Arabian News, and a lot of, consider him the most corrupt president that's ever existed, openly. His cryptocurrencies have made him billions. Um, you know, we're talking corruption at the highest level that we've never seen before. Maybe the others were doing it, but never this openly. um, you know, you know, his children have made billions. This is what they talk about here. On cryptocurrencies, on trades, on deals. His son-in-law, Jay Kushner, with, you know, the Arabians days after he had left. It's amazing the amount of corruption that's gone in within this family. This has turned into one of the most corrupt political families we've ever seen. Just imagine, like, especially, you know, the Republicans were talking about Biden's son. Imagine if Biden's sons had profited the way they have. Just imagine that, kind of, you know. You couldn't. And this has nothing to do with Republican or Democrat. This is a different crowd. Like I said, us group gets together. The Republicans in the group are definitely not MAGA. They were, you know, especially one just considers, you know, there's Republicans, there's Democrats, and then there's MAGA, you know, which is, you know, exactly what we talk about. They live in a fantasy world. Facts are not important. Ideology is, you know, and Donald Trump has a great sense of appealing to these, like, instincts of fear and negativity and blame, and, you know, that somehow appeals to a certain segment of society. Okay. Nothing I can do that. It's nothing against these people, by the way. You know, like, I know MAGA people. Okay. Their kindness on an individual level is definitely there, you know, and I'm not. Having said that, though, they're so into a type of a bullying tactic that as long as you're sticking it to the libs, that I somehow I'm out ahead. That's exactly what I want. That's why it's not really important if prices go up or down. Fantasy world. You know, we say he lies, but, you know, he actually goes out on TV and just, you know, completely lies on any kind of an issue. But his people don't care, the MAGA people, because ideology is more important than facts. And sticking it to the libs is more important than if it's good for me or if it's bad for me. You understand? It's like class warfare. I know these people that they see it literally as class warfare. And I don't understand why. I don't see it, you know. And if there is class warfare, shouldn't it be for a higher minimum wage? Like, you know, we're talking about the Gulf of Mexico now. We're changing the name. Like, that really makes America better again. Canada is our new enemy. Really? Really? This is, you know, but if you talk to them and you on an individual level, like I said, you're the kind-hearted these people. That's why I'm so amazed and so dumbfounded by the whole movement, kind of, that they don't see their negativity. You know, I've seen people kind of like I said, a kind of, but, you know, they're breaking away families and tearing them apart. You see people with masks going rolling the streets, and they just like, well, that's what we have to do. All of a sudden, you know, there's no compassion left. That same guy, because it's something far away from him. And there's fear. Like I said, fear is the basic instinct, and that's what Donald Trump is good at. He's there to make you scared. He's there to make a class warfare as though your life sucks. And that's what I think of Donald Trump, and that's how most Europeans think of Donald Trump. On top of that, last week, we have the whole Epstein files. Wow. You know, the Europeans are actually completely shocked at this point, ignorance of his voters, basically, or the people who are still sticking with him. It's they just can't believe it, especially the last week. And you're saying what happened the last week that attracted so much news from Europe in as comparison to the months before, where the war was the main issue and all these stuff, is actually easy to explain. Is since Maxwell went from a maximum security to a minimum security, you had an agent from the federal government going and interviewing her, not releasing any tapes except for like maybe 15, 20 seconds where she basically saying he's a gentleman. She gets transferred to a minimum security. They never talk to the victims. This is the funniest part. This is what they're saying here. He's all over these files. The Europeans are not, I don't know. I'm just saying what the Europeans are saying. But they are convinced that he's all over them. There was an interesting show that I saw actually on French TV with subtitles. Yes, I read subtitles. I know Americans don't like subtitles. But, and it was good investigative reporting. And they just basically look at his whole history, his whole transcript of these guys were great friends. These guys were in pageants with kids. You know, Donald Trump is not the best example of a morally ethical guy. He's not the guy that I wanted my son to be, you know, like, put it that way. I don't think, this is the funniest part, the MAGA people that I know, they would never want their children to grow up and be like Trump. Yet here they are supporting them. You know, from an ethical, moral point of view, this pussy grabbing, you know, 34th time convicted, valid sexual abuse, you know, and it's all politically motivated, you know, even though he had transcripts of lying before that, even before he became a politician. You know, you have Epstein on tape when asked about Donald Trump. They showed this, I don't know if they showed this in America. Well, I do actually, because I do follow the news. Not enough. Never see it on Fox News, never see it on Newsmax, where he's saying, you know, he pleaded the 5th, the 7th, the 14th, and I, you know, don't ask me what else he pleaded. But, you know, that alone, just think about that, you know, and you have Trump at the same time, the hypocrisy saying anybody that pleads the 5th, they're guilty. Why else would you plead the 5th, huh? You know, like a New York mafia guy. You can't make this stuff up. They consider him the biggest, not just liar, basically a circus. You know, he's turned down everything in negativity that was possibly there. You know, now he's bringing out, you know, the National Guard into states. And people are still supporting this, you know, they don't see it. That was on the news the last couple of days, of course, that, you know, they had it all. I don't know if, again, I didn't see this basically in a lot of states, even though it was discussed. Google it yourself. Like, if you look at the top 25 states with the highest murder and violent crime rate of the 25 states, please correct me if I'm wrong, I think 21 of those states were Republican. But what's the problem? You know, New York City's the problem, LA is the problem, you know, Washington, D.C. is the, it's you know, Chicago's the problem. And this is just a coincidence that they're all being run by Democrats. Wake up, people. Wake up. Don't let your ideology get in the way of the facts, please. You know, imagine if Obama had done that. Huh? Imagine if Obama, as a black man, was caught saying, yeah, I grabbed her pussy, man, you know? Yeah, because I can do that, man, because I'm important, you know? Imagine if that's what you would be thinking. You'd be thinking, you know, pimp pimp. This we're voting a pimp, you know? Or he imagine, just please imagine if he got caught with any of this crowd hanging out. And this guy is supposed to be the anti-establishment, right? No, you can't make this shit up. You really can't. And you know, you have Pam Bondi being involved. You have, you know, what I don't know if I did mention it here in this investigative reporting, and please look at this yourself, okay? Follow the money. Follow Jeffrey Epstein's money and see where that comes from, and then find out, maybe, just maybe. And you know, and I'm not here to, you know, for hypothetical situations, but this guy has connections to Israeli intelligence. That's undeniable. You know, this is not maybe, you know, or oh God, you know, Adam, your conspiracy theories. But there's nothing to hide. It's open. The question is, look at the people where he got his money from, you know, and look at all his connections. Look at, you know, the company that he had to bring these East European girls over, the agency that brought them over, you know, where Melania came from, you know, and that guy became, by the way, where his company was charged for bringing these people illegally, you know, for cheating immigration and getting an Einstein visa. This company, this guy was awarded with, he's an ambassador now. Isn't this amazing? You know, you can't get higher corruption. This is what they're reporting here. But basically, follow the money. And if you do, you might find out that there were other prime ministers involved, and another Israeli prime minister, presidents from other countries, banks, central bankers, researchers, not just Bill Gates and Bill Clinton. A lot of people were involved. And, you know, maybe, just maybe, that's why they're hiding it. If anybody remembers, the first time our labor secretary, Costa, who gave him the sweet deal, right? Gave him the sweet deal. He basically turned around and said in court, you can videotape this yourself, that they told him that he was a, you know, CIA guy. That, you know, you're not allowed to touch him. That's why he gave him that sweetheart deal. But we're finding out that there's a lot more involved, according to what we'll see if this gets buried. All we do know, though, is that the MAGA people will never, they'll never give him up. They love him. Like I said, it's a personality cult. They love him just because he's hurting others. You can say prices are up. No, they're not. They'll tell you, no, they're not. But they believe the lie. Like, they'll say, well, he said on TV gas is under $2 a gallon. No, he didn't. You know, they'll deny the truth because ideology is more important. And, you know, and I think if you're a Republican, there's no way you can be him. And here's the funny part. All of you people that are thinking this is great, God, you're just, you know, for me at least, having lived abroad so many years, instead of fighting for health care, you're cutting off healthcare. You know, instead of fighting for a higher minimum wage, you're happy that the tips are not being taxed. Well, in Europe, you know what? You don't have to tip off that much because the waiters usually make enough where they can make a living without the tip. Wow, what a thought, huh? What? He's insured on top of that and he gets a paid vacation? You gotta be fucking kidding me. No. The problem is the minimum wage. We can't increase the minimum wage. You know, the problem is these fucking immigrants that are coming in, you know, picking tobacco and cotton and avocados and all this fucking shit that are, you know, on the farms. That is the problem. You know, that's how they've convinced these guys. And as long as he's kicking these guys out, he's happy. You see what I'm trying to say? It doesn't really matter if he's covering healthcare. Those aren't really issues. You know, is he covering their healthcare? No. But you know what he did to the libs? What he did that? You know, he went and he got that guy fired. No, yeah, I don't like the statistic. He was a liberal plant. Anything. We've seen the police state come in. We've seen the worst of the worst come in from Donald Trump. Yeah. Soft power has gone abroad. My Canadian friends can vouch for this. So, like I said, just because I support Trump on Russia, or not Russia, but creating peace, at least in the Ukraine. Even if he's doing it for all the wrong reasons, he's doing it for the attention himself. He thinks he wants to win a Nobel Prize. That's the only thing that's interesting him. That's what the Europeans see, and they see the whole police state and the Epstein files, or this whole issue with Epstein as reasons of just the guy's just not no politics involved, no stability, and even if you tell people tariffs, for example, it's amazing how people are now willing to say that tariffs. In Europe, if you study economics, what the hell are tariffs? Tariffs, you could even call them a sales tax on imports if you want to. That doesn't really matter. If anybody tells you that the consumer's not going to pay, he's lying. But he continues to lie, and people go on with that lie. And like I said, they're lying because, like I said, ideology is more important than facts. That's it, everybody. Bye.